Okay, so today we're going to look at common mistakes that lead to failing the AKT or losing marks and how you can avoid them. So I'm Muhibur Rahman, I'm Medical Director of eMedica, and thank you for joining us. So let's start by looking at some of the common mistakes that lead candidates to fail the AKT, and then we'll look at how you can avoid them. So perhaps the most common reasons that people fail the AKT is not allowing enough time to prepare, not covering the whole curriculum, learning individual questions rather than learning the subjects, and finally, poor exam technique. Let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's start with not allowing enough time. We help lots of candidates every year that are preparing for resits for the AKT, as well as, of course, lots of candidates that are preparing for the first time. And when I'm talking to and helping people who are resitting, often for a second, third, or even fourth attempt, one of the most common things that I hear is that they actually just didn't realize how big the curriculum was and they'd run out of time. And so it's really important to remember that it's a very large curriculum. There's lots of different areas to cover. You know, there's 3 domains, but within each domain there's lots of things to cover. And because the AKT tests higher level thinking, it doesn't test simple recall, often you need to read things more than once or have read it and done questions on it to really understand and how to apply it. You know, it's testing your ability to synthesize the knowledge, but when you look at it in a case format, actually apply it to everyday practice. So most candidates will need 3 to 4 months preparation time. The absolute minimum I've seen someone successfully prepare for this in is about 2 months, and that's, you know, because they had a particularly quiet job and they were able to do some reading there and they already had a, you know, very good base. All right, but majority of candidates need 3 to 4 months, and a lot of people that, you know, spent 5-6 weeks preparing ran out of time. They knew that they hadn't been fully prepared, and so they weren't surprised often when they failed. And you need to really plan around, you know, how busy your rotation is, your jobs, on calls, family life, all of the other things. So just don't underestimate how big this curriculum is. The next reason is not covering the curriculum systematically. So a lot of candidates have been randomly reading questions or reading topics. They didn't have any systematic approach. Often if I asked them, had they covered the whole curriculum, they didn't know if they'd covered the whole curriculum because they never actually downloaded it. So really at the beginning of your revision period, you want to download the AKT content guide produced by the Royal College, but there's also a more concise checklist of knowledge in the MPS MRCGP revision guide, and we'll post the links for that at the bottom of this video. You want to systematically cover all 3 domains, you know, build in time to systematically go through every topic in the curriculum for clinical, which is going to be the biggest amount of time, for statistics and evidence-based practice, and for organizational. And, you know, anything that you're not already confident in, you know, look it up. Look up the guideline, read up on the symptoms and signs, you know, look up that topic from the organizational domain. The next mistake that can cause people to lose marks is that some candidates will learn individual questions instead of learning the subjects. What do I mean by that? So some candidates, their approach to preparing for AKT would be to pick an online question bank and just repeat the same questions multiple times. And often they'll tell me that, you know, the first time I was on 50%, the second time I repeated them I was on 65%, the third time 80%, the fourth time 95%. So I felt really confident, and then I was disappointed when I failed. So when you repeat the same questions, it can lead to a false sense of security, because sometimes what you do is you learn that question off by heart, you learn the pattern, and it can give a real time distortion in that questions that in the real exam that can take quite a long time, a complex graph that you need to interpret. Once you've done questions like that, because they're visual, you just remember it. As soon as you see, oh yeah, that's A, you've done it in 10 seconds. So you think, number one, that you've really learned how to interpret those things really well, but number 2, you think you're really quick at it. When you get a different question, because you're not going to get that same question, you're going to get a different question about that subject. Suddenly it takes longer, and you find sometimes actually you haven't understood it. That's why it can be useful to use multiple resources for questions. So, you know, if you finish one set of questions, instead of repeating the same one, you're going to get much more additional learning benefit by doing a different set of questions, because that will now test, have you actually understood the subjects? As well as using multiple resources to make sure that you're learning the subject, the way to consolidate your knowledge is that you want to combine reading with practice questions. So for example, early on in your revision, you might be systematically reading topics and practicing questions. Near the end, what you might do is do a set of questions. If you get it right, read the explanation there, that's probably enough because you've already covered it once. Any that you get wrong, read up in a more focused way so that you have a broader understanding. So for example, you did a question on someone who had sudden loss of vision and the answer was retinal venous occlusion. If you read up more broadly on other causes of loss of vision, any question on vision loss now, you're going to be able to answer. Finally, another really important technique for the day is time management. Okay, so some candidates, they fail the exam because of the fact that their pace is just a little bit too slow. 57 seconds per question allows you to just finish. Now, someone that spent just 1 minute per question on standard timing, they're going to miss the last 10 questions. That's 5% that they've given up. That could be the difference between pass and fail for a lot of candidates. A lot of candidates fail by 0.5% or 1% or 2, 3, 4%. So it's important to be disciplined with time. At about 55 seconds in, if you don't know the answer, put down your best guess. Don't leave it blank. You could flag it for review so that if you've got time, you can always come back. But then you can move on. That way, at least you've seen every question. And there might be some questions later on in the exam that are easier for you because you've done a job in that, or you did read that, or you're already confident in that topic. At least you get the easy marks for you, and then you can always come back with those that you were unsure of or less confident in, in those few minutes that you build up by the end, and look at them. Okay, and perhaps you can have some checkpoints. A good pace is about 33 questions every half an hour. If you keep this pace, what will happen is that you're going to finish the exam, you'll have about 8 minutes or so left to go back over any that you were unsure of. What you don't want to do equally, just as it's bad to spend a bit too long and not see the last 10 questions, someone that spent 45 seconds per question, rushed, finished with half an hour or more left, they probably missed marks or lost marks because of making simple mistakes, of misreading the question, missing important symptoms, missing important keywords. So to summarize, some of the common mistakes are not allowing enough time. So how can you avoid this one? Plan ahead. Think about when you'd like to sit the exam. Are you going to sit it in ST2? Are you going to sit it early on in ST3? What fits in with the jobs that you're going to do? When are you going to have a good amount of time to revise, given how busy that job will be? There might be certain things that you've got in family life that you don't have flexibility to work around. If you know that there are a lot of things going on, or you're going to have to travel somewhere for a family event, that might not be the best time to sit that exam because it might interfere with your revision. So just understand it's a big curriculum, there's lots to cover. Make sure you allow yourself a good amount of time, 3-4 months for most people. Some people will need more than that. Not covering the curriculum. So the way to avoid this is to make sure that you start with the curriculum checklist, and then you've got a systematic plan, plan out your time, how you're going to make sure you've covered everything once, and you want to ideally finish covering everything once, maybe a couple of weeks before. So that last couple of weeks, you're just going over topics you're less confident in, going over some of the high yield topics, maybe revising your stats and organizational, and doing lots and lots of questions, and certainly trying to do a full mock at least once before you sit the exam. Learning questions instead of the subject. So, the way to avoid this is to make sure that rather than repeat the same questions multiple times, that you use different resources so that you actually are learning the subject. And when you get a question wrong, read more broadly around it. So you don't just understand that question, you really understand the subject and have confidence to answer any question to do with that topic. Finally, poor exam technique. So one of the things that can help with that is to practice to time, is to do a full mock exam at least once before the exam. And on the day of the exam, do things like have pace checkpoints. If you're not sure of the answer at 55 seconds, move on. Read the question carefully, watch out for keywords, watch out for instructions so that you actually are making use of all of that valuable hard work that you've put in, and that knowledge, you can apply that knowledge so you actually get every mark that you're due. Okay, so these are some of the common mistakes and how you're going to avoid them. I hope that's been useful, and I hope that you've enjoyed this video series. If you have found it useful, you might find it useful to perhaps look at our full online package, which covers the whole of the AKT. So we're going to cover all 3 domains, a lot of the high yield topics. We're going to cover those things that we know people struggle with. So statistics, we're going to try and break it down, make it simple, lots of case studies so that you can understand it. We're going to cover all of the important organizational topics, and then we're going to go through key clinical topics, and we're going to combine that with lots and lots of exam level, exam layout practice questions, so that hopefully you can put all of that together, consolidate knowledge, so on the day of the exam you're going really confident, you don't just pass, you really smash that exam. So I hope that's been useful. Thank you very much, and do join us again for more videos. Thank you.